be more than human.
And welcome back to the channel. My name is J.R. Carroll. I am the author of the More Than Human novels, and today we are here to talk about epic fantasy. Now, recently, a lot of big booktubers have been doing a video and a discussion about is epic fantasy dying? And two in particular that I thought were interesting were Patrick and Johan from Library of a Viking. Now, speaking of Library of a Viking, if you would like to see the interview I did with Johan not too long ago, I will post the link right up there. Now, on to the discussion about epic fantasy. Now, watching their videos, I found one thing interesting above all others is nobody has a definition for what epic fantasy actually is. I looked online, tried to go to Webster's, and if you just type it into Google, what it will bring up is high fantasy. That's if you type in what is epic fantasy, it'll bring up the definition for high fantasy. So as I was watching Petrick talk about his thoughts on the subject, he brought up a big point about the size of books and how certain author houses have been telling authors that they need to keep their word counts at 130,000 or less, sometimes even 100,000. Now, my thought to that is the size of a book what makes the book epic? Or is it what's within the book that actually makes it epic? Is it the scope? I've also heard that the scope is what makes a book epic. And then you go back and forth. Well, can urban fantasy be epic? I've read like Sandman Slim, Monster Hunter International. The first book of both of those series, the stakes were absolutely epic. But most people wouldn't put urban fantasy in epic fantasy. It has, I think, in my estimations, it's high fantasy and then a combination between what happens, how big the stakes are, and how big the book is. Now, to me, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, I always say I have a rule of 700. Most books that I have read over 700 pages don't need to be that long. Only a handful of books that I've read that are beyond that actually needed to be that long. And with the rising costs of printing and all those, everything that really goes into that, I can understand from a business economic standpoint where some publishers might be like, hey, we don't want you writing these monster books that are, and then again, aren't bringing back in the money. And also, people, I know Petrick was like, oh, when's the last time you've seen a debut, author from a traditional publishing house be an epic fantasy book? And I have stated this on a bunch of occasions in lives with other booktubers. It's hard to sell anybody on your first book being 6, 7, 800 pages because us as readers, we're just supposed to trust you and we've never heard of you before. It's like when I was younger, I never wanted to pick up a book that was, over 600 pages. Like I looked at that and I'm like, that is so much time to invest. I'm just, so I just read a bunch of books under 500 pages while I was in high school. Most of the books I've read were, in that range. And that leads me to why I write the books the way I write my books. Most of my books hover around 300 pages, 90,000-ish words, because I want to be accessible to everybody. And I don't want the laws in the book, so I try to keep the pacing really exciting for most people while giving you and I try to keep it mainly focused on one character, so you get a flushed out character without having to have such a monster book. But we go back and it's all about traditional publishing. Because if Patrick Rothfuss or George R. R. Martin said, hey, we got the next book, they would be jumped on in a heartbeat to sell those books, to make those books. And both of those books, George said his next book could be 1,400 pages, but I guarantee you it would get published. And Rothfuss, his next book's probably 800 to 1,000 pages if he ever does it. And they would jump in a heartbeat to, get that book out. Now, they talk about the rise of romantasy and cozy fantasy as a, reason for epic fantasy downfall. Now, you'll see ebbs and flows, for different things. Like in the last, for the last 5 years, it's been grimdark, everything's grimdark, and now grimdark is starting to kind of die down a little bit, and that's just the way it goes. But here is the kicker, and this is something to really think about here. When it comes to cozy fantasy and romantasy, that is a genre read mainly, not exclusively, but mainly by women. So, the traditional epic fantasy readers have mostly, not exclusively, been men. So the thing about it is, guys, if you want more epic fantasy from traditional publishers, you have to dole out the cash. Let them know you are willing to do that. But here is my big point coming up. I hope you've all, been watching to this point, and if you have, subscribe. Why don't you check out my books if you want to get some new reading in? And there is especially book number 2, More Than a God War. It's very epic in a small size there. So here we go. It's kind of your fault, guys. If you want epic fantasy, I guarantee you in the self-publishing sphere, you will find plenty of books that are epic fantasy, that are really big books that you can go out and buy. But what I've noticed is, every time people talk about epic fantasy dying, it's all in the traditional publishing sense. And I don't know why that matters. The only thing I can think of is because traditional publishers will put those books in front of your face. And now with self-publishing, you're going to have to go looking. You're going to have to go type in new epic fantasy or epic fantasy books into Amazon, and you're going to have to do some scrolling if you want to find some that are not traditionally published. I guarantee you there are amazing epic fantasies out there that have been published in the last few years by self-published authors. Guys, I implore you, don't worry about what the in this day and age, you don't have to worry about what traditional publishers are doing, because there's more than enough self-published books out there that fit any genre, and all you got to do is do a little digging and you will find some gems. I have found some myself. So, is epic fantasy dying? I don't think so. Even in the traditional publishing sense, I don't think it's dying. I think there's cycles, and I think epic fantasy is cycling out right now. It'll be back, guys. It'll be back. But if you want to go find it, look into some great self-published books and you will get it. And remember, be more than human.